Greetings. I recently downloaded DXO Photo Lab 8 trial version. The reason being I wanted to try the print module within the program. Now, being new to DXO, when I first install the program, I'm allowing the program to make its adjustments and taking control. And there's settings we can agree to, whether it be no corrections or just optical corrections. But in my case, I've let the program take control of the image here. So you can see at the beginning of the video, these are the prints that I've done using DXO Photo Lab 8. The results are quite nice. From my personal experience, the little experience I've had with Photo Lab, the print module, I'm happy with the results so far. Now, I don't have any affiliation with DXO. I'm not here to promote them, but this is just my experience with the trial version and if anybody else is interested. Now, if you already have Photo Lab 8 or the other versions of Photo Lab, you'll have far more experience than I have with the program, especially when it comes to printing. But as I've used it so far, I think using the basics in the program, such as the light module here, color, detail. I'm not going into using the local adjustments, the effects. I'm more concentrating on the exposure, the tone curves, and these tools, just the basic tools within the program. Also, I've been editing for quite a few years now, and I've used other programs, photo editors such as Raw Therapy, GIMP, Photoshop, Lightroom. I've tried Darktable, but my raw editor of choice is Raw Therapy, and the remainder of my editing that I do once I export the raw files is in GIMP. I think that GIMP is highly underrated, and people may complain about the program, but I think it's due to people not understanding the program, and the program itself can really get some super fine detail and editing within that program if you know what you're doing and the purpose of your editing. So back to DXO here. In the light module here, as I mentioned earlier, that I allowed DXO Photo Lab 8 to take control with the images, being new to the program. So if we want to change anything, we can just come to for example, the exposure. We have our toggle switches here, and we can just turn them on and off as we need to. If we don't want them on, or DXO to correct something, we can just turn these off or back on. Or for example, if we change the exposure up or down, we can just double click and zero them out, so there's been no effect applied, for example, in exposure, the tone curve, and other tools within this program. Now, one of the things that I've found, not only DXO, but in other software as well, raw editors, that if I just show this would be easier. So if I come to the bottom, so we have our selective tone, our DXO clear view, the tone curve. Down the bottom we have vignetting. Now, this image here was shot at 5.6, and most of you that are probably watching this are photographers, whether you're a beginner or advanced or intermediate. And I think most people understand about aperture. If we have a wide open aperture, we have less in focus. And when we're wide open, depending on what lens you have, that there's vignetting within the image. And when we shut down or close the aperture, for example, in this image we see in front of us to 5.6, there should no longer be any vignetting in the image. So depending on your lens and camera combination, when the vignetting corrects itself. But as you can see here, I've disabled the vignetting, and if I turn this on, you can see this is not the only program that does this. If we leave it at default, is that it overcompensates in those vignetting areas it's trying to correct. So if I just turn that off again, we can see the sky, the blue, the graduation of the color very even, very smooth from darker to light. But if we turn that vignetting correction on, it overcompensates, and I suspect it's not reading the aperture value, it's just on by default. So if it's on 1.8, it's probably not reading that it's on 1.8 and just applying the vignetting by default. So if you're using the program, if you're new, such as myself, or more advanced editors that have been using DXO for quite a long period of time, that it's probably a good idea to turn this off in most images, and then we don't have that overcompensation on the edges of our images. So I'm just looking at this program at face value for now because of the limited experience that I have. But the editing and printing that I've done so far in the program, I've got quite good results, I would say, for myself. The prints that are coming out using the print module and DXO, through my experience, are really showing some great detail, fine detail. Also, the color rendition when it's being printed out is very close to what I'm seeing on the screen. Now, it's not ever going to be perfect because we're editing on a backlit screen compared to a reflective surface, what we print on. But from the results that I've got so far, it's done quite a good job reflecting what I see on the screen. Now, the other thing in DXO, we have available color management. So if you've been editing and colors are important to you, you know color management is a big part of having your colors the way you want them to look. So on the next tab, we have color. Now we come down to the bottom, we have the HSL options here. You can see I've just made a few changes. It was basically a bit of saturation change, very minor. But down below, also you can see I've zeroed a lot of these out in the raw file, trying to get the colors the way I wanted them to look. So before I go to the soft proofing, I'll just cover the color and black and white rendering now. So I didn't create a custom color profile for these set of images, but what I've done is where we have our type, you can see I've selected camera body. Now by default it comes up as generic rendering, so I'm just going to click on that and we can see the rendering DXO camera profile DC S5. So this is the Panasonic S5 and this is the generic rendering that the software is producing. But what I've done is, if I go to the drop down arrow again, we have camera body, color positive film, and we also have the option of using DCP profiles. Now these are the custom profiles we can create with a color chart. I do have a few, but it's not for this particular image. But we do have the options within DXO to use our custom color profiles created with the color checker software and apply those to our images when we're editing. Now what I'm going to do is go back to camera body, and below this now we can see the rendering. So the drop down arrow again, we can see by default it's just showing the top one, which is the Canon 10D, 20D, 300 and 350D by default. So we can scroll down the list and find the Panasonic S5, and according to whatever your camera is, we can find that on the list. If I scroll down to Panasonic, so we can see here Panasonic Lumix G92, the GH7. We have here the S5. Now DXO has bundled these together. It's given us a generic profile that we can use for our camera. So we can see also the Leica Q2. So these cameras do have color differences, but it's bundling it together so we have a general color palette that we can use. So let's select that, and you can select your own camera depending on which one you have. So I'll select that so you can see the color rendering that it's giving us. I was quite happy with the blues within the image. Also the brickwork on the lighthouse, I just saturated a little bit more to give the brickwork, the brown brickwork, a little bit more saturation. But I think it did quite a good job for what I wanted it to look like. In this image, I wasn't looking for color accuracy. So now that we've had a look at the options for our color, the basic type and rendering, I just want to come down to the bottom. We have soft proofing. Now, if you've been printing for any period of time, you're going to know the importance of soft proofing. So I've created a few different custom paper profiles for different papers that I have. And at the beginning of the video, there were different paper types that I was showing from the Heavyweight Matte Duo by Ilford and also other papers that I had used. So for this image, this is the ICC profile that was used for the printer and paper combination. So let's turn on the soft proofing. So now we can see the white background. We have that white paper and it gives us a better idea what our image will look like. Now we also have another option, which is simulate paper and ink. Now for myself, from the experience I've had through the years, that I don't particularly rely on this. I haven't found it very reliable, but we still can use it. But when it comes to contrast in the image, details, and the color of the image, it can change it quite a bit. And I don't rely on this tool, but we can still use it all the same. So if I activate that, we can see how it looks washed out. We lose contrast and detail. But when I've been printing, I haven't found this the case from my printer and paper combination. If I just leave this off, the prints coming out are very close to what I'm seeing on screen. Now this will come down to your setup, your computer, your experience, your printer and paper combination. So again, this is coming down to personal experience. We may need to do a few smaller prints, test prints, so we can see how the colors are rendering, what kind of detail is showing within the image. But for myself, I tend to leave this off, but I still do use it. It tries to simulate what it's going to look like on paper, but we're talking about editing on a backlit screen instead of looking at a reflective surface. So where we see the ICC profile that was created for this particular paper, I've left it on perceptual. So if I change it to relative, we can see the change there in the image. Relative, perceptual, not going into what all these mean. If you already know about soft proofing and printing, I don't have to explain this, or if you've been editing for any period of time. So let me turn that back to perceptual. So I'll turn the soft proofing off. So here the image that I printed out using DXO Photo Lab 8, I think it's done quite a good job. The detail within the image is quite nice. It hasn't over sharpened anything. So I like the detail even in the antennas on top of the lighthouse here. We can see the windows here very clear. Hopefully this is coming up on video. In the brickwork, even in the top here of the brickwork, it's printed very fine detail. It's done quite a good job. Also along the edges, if we have a look, I can't see any haloing or any artifacts around the fine edges around the building here. Even detail in the shadows. It's done quite a good job in the program. So I'm just using the trial version of DXO Photo Lab 8 to see how I could use the print module. I was more looking at the printing in the program than the adjustments within the program, but I think with the small adjustments it's done quite good. Now the gradients in the blue that I've printed out have come out quite nice. So the paper I'm using here is the Ilford Heavyweight Matte Duo. So you can print on both sides on this paper. This paper does have a high white point, so if you're not familiar with papers, don't be too concerned. I'm more looking at how the image was printing using the DXO software, and from the results I'm seeing, it's really printing nice fine detail without looking over sharp. For me, that's one thing I'm pleased about, especially in the darker shadows. I can still see the details in the brickwork, which is quite nice, and we can have a look at the details up on the glass on top of the lighthouse here as well. For myself, I would like to have the software a little bit longer. It gives you a 30-day free trial to use the program, but for myself, it's a bit like having a camera. It takes quite a while to get used to the camera, and it's a bit like that with software for me. It takes quite a while for me to get to know a software and become familiar with it. But as you can see, I think it's done quite a fine job, the DXO print module in the program. So that's a look at the prints that were produced using DXO Photo Lab 8. So that's it for this video, and peace be unto you.